Patience in World of Warships Legends is an invaluable asset, and very rarely do I get a match that demonstrates that fact as conclusively as this one. I'll elaborate on that in a little bit, but of course, today we're taking a look at the Tier 7 Tech Tree Spanish cruiser, Cataluña. The entire Spanish cruiser line is currently in early access. The only way to get it right now is by purchasing early access crates, and they have a fairly low drop rate to get this ship and some of the others. However, they will all be free in the next update. I'm going to show you my commander build on the screen. It is the commander you can get by completing the calendar event ongoing right now, Pascual Cervera y Topete. And of course, his skills are going to be affecting the stats that I read to you. We're going to get that out of the way as quickly as we can here. We'll talk about the commander himself because he's really good for this line in a video on a different Spanish cruiser or different match. I just want to give you an idea of how this ship performs, and then I want to call the shots later on in this game. Before we get to the stats, I'll set the scene for you and pay attention to the minimap as this goes on, because this is a phenomenon that occurs quite often in World of Warships Legends. Obviously, this is a domination mode game, and there's two ways you can win it. You can sink all the enemy ships, or you can hold the majority of the caps and win by reaching 1,000 points before the red team. About 7 minutes into this battle, my team is going to have taken all 3 of the capture circles. And at that point, we've set up the win conditions, right? It would be incumbent on the enemy team to push into the capture circles that we took and take them back or sink us. Otherwise, they'll just lose on points. However, sometimes what happens when your team takes all the capture circles is they decide they're actually bored. And so what they really need to do is push in and throw for no reason. And that's exactly what's going to happen here. We're going to take all the capture circles, and then the battleships and the cruisers on my team are going to decide they need to push into the enemy team, which is going to be playing passively inside of their own spawn for the entirety of this game. They're going to decide they need to push into that for no reason, and one by one, they're going to sink, leaving me the last ship left alive, because we're going to play quite passively near this alpha cap throughout the duration, and that is going to come back and reward us in the end. Now, as for the Cataluña, the Tier 7 Tech Tree cruiser here, we will run down the stats. To begin with, on the survivability, we've got 40,800 HP, and I think that is pretty decent for a Tier 7 cruiser. The armor here is not that bad either. The bow and the stern has 25mm plating, and the bow has a very big schnoz that can be overmatched by the likes of pretty much any battleship you're going to encounter, but that's not too far removed from a lot of Tier 7 heavy cruisers. The casemate armor in the side, it's actually pretty good. The citadel is quite robust, and the armor belt is 30mm in the midsection of the ship, although the upper belt armor in the deck is 27, so that can be overmatched. The citadel belt itself is, I believe, 150mm, and the citadel is fairly exposed in the water. In fact, it's gigantically exposed. It sits far above the water, so if you give broadside, it can probably be hit pretty easily. However, if you keep the thing angled, it is quite tanky. And one thing about this commander that you can get from the calendar event, his base trait reduces incoming damage from shells, torps, and bombs to your cruiser per 1% HP lost. Fully maxed, it's a 0.2% buff, so it's basically the same undead skill that you can use with the Vampire 2. It's basically the same base trait as Bergamini, the Italian destroyer commander, except it's for cruisers. And so that goes a little ways toward making this thing fairly tanky. The main battery guns, well, there are 9 of them. They are 203mm or 8-inch guns in 3 triple turrets. They have a fairly short range if you don't build into it, which I haven't, 16.1 kilometers. Maybe that doesn't sound too short, but there are other cruisers that do a lot better than that. And of course, these guns have the trademark unique gimmick that sets this line apart. They have shell racks, basically. And so every time your guns reload, you have 2 racks of shells in there by default. The legendary skill on the calendar commander can give you 3, but there is a trade off for that. And so after you fire both of your racks, as we're doing here at the Connecticut, it takes 18.5 seconds for the guns to reload. Pretty long reload time, but the time between the 2 salvos in the 2 racks is 2.5 seconds. So it's basically like a built-in main battery reload booster that never goes away. And of course, you have control over the salvos. You can fire them when you want. You just have to keep in mind the 18.5 second reload after you fire the second one. And these guns are independent of each other. If you were to only fire one of them and use both racks, then it would reload. You could go to the next one and so on. So if it makes you feel better, you could sort of ripple fire this instead of doing full salvos and keep up the HE spam a little bit better like other conventional cruisers. The turret traverse time with the Ingenious skill active is 23.8 seconds. It's pretty bad if you don't have that skill active, though. And the dispersion numbers in the specs page all look pretty good, although I don't really have much to compare them to. The maximum HE shell damage is 3,100, 15% fire chance, and being 203mm guns, pens 34mm. AP shell damage, maximum of 5,100, kind of like the American cruisers, although it doesn't have any kind of improved pen angles. And the penetration, again, I don't have too much to compare it to. It's got only 176 millimeters of pen at maximum range. I'm pretty sure other cruisers do a lot better than that. I think the HE is perhaps more the shell that you would go to. But if you get a broadside cruiser and you use the burst fire built-in gimmick to send 2 salvos of AP at its broadside, well, that can hurt pretty badly. It's got secondaries as well. They're probably not worth mentioning or building into. Torpedoes, too. It's got 2 torpedo launchers on either side of the ship. Or 1 torpedo launcher on either side of the ship, I mean. They are a quadruple torpedo launchers. They have an 8 km range, 61 knot speed. They hit for 14,862 damage. And, well, you won't use them all that often unless things are pushing into you, although later on in this battle, we will get an example of those torpedoes working. The 8 km range just makes them a little bit more difficult than if they were longer range. We'll gloss over the AA stats because, well, nobody cares, and I haven't really faced any CVs with the thing. The maneuverability, though, is quite good. I do have the Epic Battle Booster flag on, so that is giving us a speed buff. And with that, we've got 38.1 knots of speed. Quite fast, I would say. 850-meter turning circle is not that bad. And the rudder shift of 5.1 seconds is pretty good. And then the concealment with Mikawa as 1 inspiration and the concealment module is 10.8 kilometers. So all those stats, fairly good. And this burst fire gimmick that they have is really fun to use, especially if you use the new commander's legendary skill to give you 3. But again, we'll talk about that in a little bit of a different video. Now for what's going on in this battle. You can see it's occurred already. We have taken all the caps, or we did. But the team that was responsible for taking the Charlie cap, all of them have sunk, leaving only us and the people on this flank left alive, as well as the ones responsible for taking the Bravo cap. So at this point, when we hold 2 out of 3 of the caps, what we really ought to do as a team is play more passively. The enemy needs to push into us in order to win this battle. And so what we should have is some ships playing passively near the Bravo cap, waiting for the people in the Charlie area of the map to push in there, and fighting them as they do. And there's zero reason whatsoever that the friendly battleships on this side of the map, the destroyer and the cruiser, should all be pushing into this Florida and this other battleship. But of course they are, and we're here to deal some damage as these guys are distracted shooting at our teammates. You can see we've preserved our HP pretty well, and I think that's really important if you're playing a cruiser. If you preserve your HP really well, till the end of a battle, then you have more leeway and more ability to take risks at the end of the battle in order to fully utilize your DPM and deal a lot of damage. We're up to 71,000 right now, and there is less than 5 minutes left to go in the game. By the time it ends, we are going to have 100,000 more damage done. So those of you who think that perhaps the Spanish cruiser lines with this burst fire gimmick would be bad on the DPM, not so much. Especially also, again, if you use that legendary skill on the commander, it helps even more than this, but obviously it's not necessary in order to deal good damage. Here, we're facing off against a, I think, lower tier Spanish cruiser. I believe this is the Tier VI, the Asturias. And as you can see, he is turning to give us broadside, which we're anticipating, so we've switched to the AP in between the reloads. We're about 5 seconds away now, and he's not quite flat broadside to us yet, but he is going to turn and make sure he gives us the flattest broadside possible. So of course, the AP is going to find his citadel twice with the first salvo, and the second one is enough to take him out. It counts as a dev strike. So you can see just how much potential there is for this line to be very good at sinking other cruisers. Feels pretty satisfying, and you would think the Asturias himself, having the same gimmick, would probably be wise to not giving the Tier VII Spanish cruiser broadside, but I guess not. Now at this point, the enemy team has taken 2 out of 3 of the caps. We've only got 1 DD left, and then besides him, we're the only one left. It's not going to last for long, though. He's spotted, and apparently the split out here thinks the battle's just over, so he's got license to open water gunboat us. Big mistake on his part. Again, the burst fire gimmick coming in handy here. We can pump in a lot of damage to this split in real quick order. Front guns, back guns. You can see what I meant earlier about all these guns having independent reloads, so you can ripple fire if you'd like. Split has almost no HP left. These are big 203mm guns, don't forget. They do a lot of damage to destroyers, even if the reload's not that great. And of course, he's on DCP. He's got that fire burning. I don't think that last salvo hit him, but the fire is lethal. There goes the split, and there goes a little bit of our HP, courtesy of the enemy Xarkun. I think we're lucky that we didn't get dev struck there, because as I said, the Citadel is very accessible, but thankfully it's a German battleship with not so good accuracy, and no offense to this Xarkun, but, well, you'll see how he handles this engagement here. At this point, we're still ahead of the enemy team on points, thanks to our team taking all 3 of the capture circles and holding them for the majority of the game. That's useful, even though they all decided they really needed to throw this battle and died for no reason. But that's good for us, because that means that if we can sink this Xarkun, we are going to be able to win the game on points. And there we get a nice torpedo hit against him, netting us the Confederate and the high caliber medals to go along with our dev strike. And of course, with these being 203mm guns on the HE and the 34mm pen, we can pen the Xarkun bow armor. I think we can pen the deck as well, not to mention the superstructure, and we can light fires. By this time in the battle, he's probably out of his damage control parties, so most of these fires are probably going to end up being permanent. Well, I guess he DCP'd those, but we're just going to farm him down as he pushes in. We're going to maintain an angle to him. The belt armor is going to be good enough, more than good enough, to bounce his shells. Obviously, he'd overmatch the stern and the bow, but if we can make or bait him into shooting the side armor, then that's how we can protect ourselves, and frankly, I don't think his aim is all that on point. He's losing HP all the time as he pushes in. There's less than a minute left to go. The score is at 695 in favor of the enemy to 650. As soon as they get into this cap, we are going to stop accruing points from it, but we're able to accrue enough points from it that we're at 662, where we freeze to 713 and counting. Xarkun has a little bit over 10k HP left, and there's 30 seconds left to go in this game. The damage output on this cruiser is going to be good enough to carry us here. There's the Xarkun, again, a fire ticking, more salvos from this burst fire gimmick. That's the end of the rear turret, and now the front 2 are reloaded just in time as the clock hits 15 seconds to take the Zeton out, get us our third kill of the game, bring our total up to 177, but most importantly, put us far enough ahead on points for the last 2 seconds to eke out the win here and get the solo warrior. Again, in World of Warships Legends, patience is an invaluable asset. If you have taken the majority of the capture circles, much less all of them, do not push into the enemy team. Exercise patience, wait for them to push into you, and if you think it's boring, perhaps this isn't the game for you, because it is a slow-paced game with some tactics that go into it. Thankfully, we were on this team to secure the victory despite our team's best efforts to throw, and this battle has got me thinking that the Cataluña and this Spanish line actually has some really fantastic potential. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.